Well, hello everybody. You know, in Alaska the summers are really short and we tend to be pretty busy up here. So a lot of years we will postpone the processing of our salmon that we catch until winter months when things slow down as far as outdoor activities goes. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the steps that we take to put a smoked flavoring on our salmon, and we jar it. It's my favorite way of doing it because it's preserved at room temperature. You don't have to freeze it or anything. It'll last several years. It never does make it through 1 year because we always eat all of it. It's ready to eat as soon as you take it out of the jar. So stay tuned. Have a few things laid out here that you will need to do this process. Of course, you're going to need salmon. These are Sockeye salmon from the Copper River. That's typically what we catch the most of. And you're going to, of course, need some jars. I've found that about 25 pounds of salmon gives you 16 jars, which is a batch in the pressure canner. This is something you'll have to invest in, but this thing has paid for itself many times over. They're a couple $100s for this. Just basically a big pressure cooker. You'll also need a smoker of some kind. Right now we're using an electric smoker because we happen to be at a cottage that we're renting in town. So just for convenience sake, got a little Chief smoker, or this Big Chief. Yeah, this is the Big Chief. And that'll hold easily 25 pounds of salmon. You're gonna need lids. Always use new lids when you jar salmon or anything. Don't even use the lids that come on the jars when you buy them. You want to make sure that it seals when you put it through the process. This is just a little thing for handling the hot top jars when they come out. So the first thing I do is I brine the fish, or cut it, clean it, and then I put it in a dry brine, which I've done fancy brine recipes over the years, and it really never seems to make any difference. So I just, for several years, I've just gone back to a 50-50 brown sugar and salt mixture. It's important to note right up front that the brining and the smoking that I'm doing on this salmon is simply to put flavor in it. It's not a preservative. The preserving is going to happen in the canning process. So this isn't like a salmon jerky that you can leave out of, in a package for weeks at a time. That's a whole different process. So step one is to get all your stuff together and accessible. This is for Steve Wallace, one of my favorite YouTube channels, Camping with Steve. So step two, it's called Sockeye Red by Midnight Sun Brewery. You got to stay hydrated through this process. It's kind of a long ordeal. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is finish. We have a couple of pieces of salmon left to trim. I'm not doing any fancy fillets. I have done that in the past, but I found that when you stuff it in a jar, it really doesn't matter how pretty you cut it up. So that was kind of a waste of time. Now I just split the fish just to open it up and get the flavor in it. And you want to be able to peel the skin off. I don't put the skin in the jar. So part of this process, the smoker will actually loosen the skin where it'll just peel right off. So what I've got here is just a chunk of salmon that we've hacked it up into round pieces. We didn't fillet it at the river. And we just got it straight to a freezer. I'm just going to split it. I'm not doing a fillet, I'm just splitting it on one side of the spine, cutting through the ribs. One thing to remember about this process, especially the canning process, is if you leave a few bones in it, it doesn't matter. They get soft, just turn to a powder, so it doesn't matter if you leave a few bones in it. When it comes to the smoker, we'll lay it skin side down on the racks. I'll put a layer of fish and a layer of the brine. It's a dry brine, like I said, so we don't put any liquid in here. It's just 50-50 salt and brown sugar and that will pull liquid out of the fish. You'll end up with a soupy mixture in here. You can use that soupy mixture, that brine, for 2 or 3 batches. So you don't have to throw it out after one batch. We had about 2 pounds of brown sugar and 2 pounds of salt in this for this batch. So I'm splitting the fish. Like I say, this is not what you would do to make a fillet. In a fillet, you would just remove the meat off each side of the spine, and you would end up with something that looks like this. And then you would go through with a fillet knife and trim out those bones. But we're not even worrying about that right now, because part of the process, as I said, the heat from the smoker will cause the skin to come off easy, and it'll also allow these rib bones, which are kind of heavy duty, they'll peel right out too. The dry brine, sugar and salt, and just sprinkle it all over. What I've always found is, however much flavor you want to put into the fish is determined by the length of time you put it in the brine. If you're doing a full smoked fish where you're preserving it with the brine and the smoking process, then you would brine it and smoke it for a lot longer. I'm just trying to put a little bit of salt and sugar flavor into the fish and pull out some of the water. And so I tend to leave it in only about 4 hours. So what I'll do is kind of move these pieces around and get the salt kind of coat everything with the salt and sugar. And then I'm going to put it in a refrigerator shelf. I've cleared a shelf and let them stay in there for the 4 hours. Actually, I'll probably pull it out about halfway through and stir everything around just to make sure all the fish are getting evenly, exposed to the salt and sugar. You can see this is still kind of dry, but after just about 30 minutes in the brine, the fish will be, the brine will be turned into a liquid. Now we wait. Okay, so it's been in the brine in the fridge for about 2 hours. I'm going to take it out and just move things around to make sure that the salmon is exposed to the brine evenly. So I don't know if you can see up on this, but so if you notice, it's the salt and sugar has basically dried the fish out already quite a bit. It's turned into a liquid. I don't know if you can see the liquid, but I'm just gonna try to pull the chunks from the bottom. See, it actually gets more firm because it's pulling water out of the fish, the salt. So I'm gonna pull the chunks from the bottom bring them to the top. Just can't really stir it because it's solid, but that's it. Now I'll put it back in the fridge for another 2 hours. We had the salmon soaking in the brine in the refrigerator for 4 hours, and now it's coming out. And before I put it in the smoker, I got to rinse off the brine. If you don't do that, it'll be too salty. So I've got to rinse the salt sugar mixture off. Put it in a fresh pan. Fun fact, this is where we cut out some type of injury. These fish get preyed on by bears and seals and sea lions all the way up through the river, so that's where we had to cut out a tooth or a claw mark. This is a Big Chief, really, really common smoker. I've had this one for more than 15 years. They don't clean up pretty, so they look a little gooey and grody, but it's just smoke stained on the inside. Just an aluminum box, basically, very lightweight. That's the inside of the door. inside, it's an electric smoker, so this is not off-grid, obviously, but that's just a hot plate, or a chip pan that sits in a hot plate down here. And then in this one you have 5 racks plus a drip tray. The chips we're going to be using are store-bought. You get them at Walmart or any big box store. This is alder chips, probably my favorite. Alder grows wild up here in Alaska, so you can go harvest your own if you want to. But for a couple of dollars, you go buy a bag of chips. This tip will save you a whole lot of time during the cleanup process. Cooking spray is your best friend because salmon skin will stick to these racks like crazy. You can spend hours picking the dried salmon skin on here, but you know, back in the days before they had this spray-on cooking spray, we used to use Crisco, and you just gotta rub it all over the grills. But the spray is real easy. You just give them a good coating and then flip it over. Flip over the racks. Give them another coat. And that should make the salmon skin pop right off of there. I'm gonna load the fish onto the racks and into the smoker in here. Then I'll take the whole thing outside. This has to go on outside. And that's gonna be an all-night process. So we'll cut to that and then we'll go to sleep eventually. I'm even gonna go ahead and load in the chips for the first round. Once I start smoking it, you don't have to keep the smoke going. I'm going to smoke this for about 10 or 12 hours, and you don't have to keep chips and smoke going the whole time. 2, maybe 3 pans of chips is enough to give the fish all the smoke flavor you want. So this is the brine from the first batch, and if you'll notice, that's like salty, sugary water, and none of the brine I didn't add any liquid to this. This has all just been water that's been pulled out of the fish by the salt. And looks kind of gross, but it is certainly not garbage. In fact, the second batch of salmon, when this thaws out, I'm going to drop it in this brine. You can use it 2 or 3 times, easy. Okay, we are going to load the smoker. I like to load it indoors because it's night now, and it's also raining and possibly snowing, so I'll load it inside, carry the whole thing outside and plug it in and let it smoke all night for about 12 hours. But okay, so here's my racks that I have already pre-greased. Just gonna lay out, and we start out with the thickest cuts of meat. Put those towards the bottom and save your thinner stuff for the top rack. So I'm kind of looking for the thick stuff. I'm leaving a room between the cuts for the smoke to kind of go up between the meat. And this thing has 5 racks. I'm gonna go ahead and get the top rack going. Here we have a batch loaded into the smoker on the racks. Thicker cuts to the bottom, thinner cuts to the top, or as best I can. I got the tray loaded, or the hot plate loaded with alder chips, and it's going outside. I thought it would be a good idea to show what we usually do with the smoked salmon in the jar. My favorite way of doing it is to make a salmon spread, salmon cream cheese spread out of it. So the first thing I do is get the salmon out, of course. And put that into your container. I use a microwave. I'm going to pop it in the microwave just to soften up the cream cheese, so make sure you use a microwave safe dish. And then before I put in the cream cheese, I think it's a lot easier if you just take a heavy duty spoon and flake up the salmon. Remember, this salmon is fully cooked. You can totally eat it right out of the jar. It's a lot like tuna. That's what that looks like. Now, I'm going to put in the cream cheese. 1 jar of the salmon. I usually put 2 of these, which equals 16 ounces. So that's a pound of cream cheese, 1 jar of salmon. It seems to be about the right mixture. 1. Now that goes in the microwave to soften up cream cheese. Maybe for a minute and a half, or if you hear something explode, then you know it's time to take it out. And in this case, I'm going to put a half an onion in there just to give you something to crunch and a little bit of flavor. Cut it fine. You don't want huge chunks of onion. Yes, I heard the explosion. Okay, it's probably about enough. Here, soften it. There's the onion. And you can get creative with what you put in it. If I have them, sometimes I'll put capers in, like maybe a 1/4 cup of capers. So it takes a few minutes with a heavy duty spoon just to make sure all the chunks are broken up. And also, if you put that heavy duty hot sauce paste in there, you want to make sure that's thoroughly stirred in, or else somebody's going to get a surprise. That's what it looks like. The salmon spread is ready. You can put it on crackers if you want to. I usually put it on bagels, but we don't have bagels at the moment. We have English muffins. So that's what I'm gonna just slap some on the English muffin. And I know this is breakfast and I'm drinking beer, but the sacrifices we make.
What is sacrifice?
So I usually like to have it with a fried egg, if I can, a runny fried egg. I could eat this every single day. Do I need my hat on?
I look tired.
Yeah, I feel tired. Oh, actually hungover is actually. Hold on, let me put a hat on. I don't know how that helps me not look hungover. Okay, so this is the next day. This salmon, we let it smoke because it's kind of cold outside. We let it run about 14 to 16 hours. It's already cooled down, everything is. See how easy that came off of the grill? Because we sprayed it with the cooking oil, the cooking spray. Should be able to just peel the skin right off. I need a scrap bucket. Some people, even some people in my family, like to eat that skin. I don't, but it's kind of crispy. Sometimes when we do a steak, we will put a piece of that on the steak just while it's cooking, just to give it a little smoky flavor. It's kind of good. So the scraps. The canning process will soften up the bones, but I still don't want to put a bunch of big heavy-duty bones in it.
This is more like jerky turned out, unless it's a
Okay.
bone. And the bones, they just come right off.
Okay, the next step is we're going to load this salmon into the jars. It's 8 jars, that's what I'm estimating. It's not enough to make a batch in the canner, but we're going to go ahead and just so the salmon doesn't have to sit in this big tub while the next batch comes around. So we're going to go ahead and pack these jars. So we just drop it in, try to have some larger chunks along with the small stuff. And you want to pack it pretty tight. The idea is you really don't want to leave much airspace. In fact, you're going to leave some head space.
About an inch.
I usually go down to about this rim on the jar. But first get it packed in. Press it down in. And then keep packing. About what you want it to look like. About an inch of head space. That's what this tool is for measuring the head space, but I just use this rim on the first rim on the jar. So when it comes to the pressure canner, very important that you follow a proven recipe. The pressure canner came with a recipe book. You can also find recipes at, I think it's the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They publish a whole list of recipes for canning, anything, fruits, vegetables, soups, meats. But the point is, always follow a proven recipe, because you can get a serious case of food poisoning just winging it. Everything we've done so far to this fish is just for flavor. This is what's actually going to preserve the meat, make it, bacteria-free.
I guess I need the man hand to press this.
There's another whole piece of fish in there.
Yeah, who'd hit that? Look at it. You can just put the whole thing like that.
Pressing it down in there, it gets off the, just want to look and make sure you don't have any big air pockets down in there. This is way too full. This already pressed it yet?
I left it for you to press. I said it needs man hands. Man hand push.
You want to keep this area up around the rim free of particles, debris, fish bones, and so on. In fact, you got a little too much in this one. Your lids are falling too. You don't want anything to get up between the rim of the jar and the seal that we'll be putting on it. This is also too full. Something we do is we put a little bit of something extra in there on top of it. Usually we put garlic, and sometimes we put a hot chili pepper, like a really hot one. Habanero or
Scotch bonnet.
Scotch bonnet, because we like spicy stuff, but you don't have to. You can always add that afterwards, but right now all we have is garlic, so we're going to put just a teaspoon of chopped garlic in each jar. So behind the scenes, we've been getting the lids ready. I put the lids in some boiling water and let them sit for a little bit. That softens up the seal. And it is very, very critical to get the rim of the jar perfectly cleaned before you put the lid on, or else you'll get a bad seal and it won't pull a vacuum, so you'll have to either eat it as soon as you do the boil or reboil it, which is a pain in the butt. So I start with just get any extra salmon particles away from the rim like this. Just give it a quick wipe with a dry paper towel. Just to make sure we get all the oil, because salmon's a pretty oily fish. I want to get all the oil off the rim. So I found that it really increases your sealing rate if you just run around the rim. You don't want to get the alcohol inside the jar, of course, but I've just got a little alcohol on there. It's rubbing alcohol. So once you do that, you just set the lid on, and the ring is really just to help retain the seal lid. You don't want the ring to be too tight, or else it's not going to let the excess gases escape inside the pressure cooker. So you just barely snug this down. I usually just snug it until it starts to turn the jar like that. That's it. And then like this. Just start the ring on there. Just barely tight. Something else you need to watch out for is when you start to reuse your rings, which these are reusable, sometimes they'll get a dent in them, and that can cause your seal to fail. So give a careful look at your rims and throw any away that have a dent in this area. You want that rim squeaky clean, and you don't even want particles up near it. See, I'm gonna push that down. Okay. So as you can tell, this is a multi-day process. If you have more than one batch, I believe we're gonna have 3 batches through the smoker. I'm thinking that's about 60 pounds of salmon total, and it's going to be we're already over 24 hours into the process. We probably have about 2 more days. So we are now moving on to the canning process. I'm going to do 12 jars in this batch. This canner will hold 16, but anyway, this is what I've got to do at the moment, is these 12 jars. If you notice, there is a weight. It's a pressure cooker. So we're not going to go into great detail about how a pressure cooker works, but there is a weight on this particular one, and it has a calibrated, I guess, controlled leakage setting, or a hole. There's 3 positions on the weight. I don't have my instruction book with me, but we have always used the 10-pound setting. I think that's for sea level. So we don't need that yet. What you do is really simple. First of all, this canner, I think it's American brand. It has a metal-to-metal seal. There's no rubber or silicone seal in here. That's one of the things that makes them nice. There's no rubber parts to wear out. There's a couple of little spacer plates that come in it. That's just to keep your jars separated, and you don't want the bottom jars, I guess, directly on the hot surface of the pan, so you put that in. I'm just going to put these in here. It'll hold 8. This canner holds 8 jars on each row, so I'm going to put 8 on the bottom. Not too much water. I'm going to pour it kind of on the side. What I'm going to do is make the water level inside the pot come up to about here, about 2 or 3 inches. All you're doing is This water is just to create the steam inside the pressure cooker. Okay, we've moved over to the stove because this gets pretty heavy. I didn't want to load it up totally until I moved it, but so I've got the 8 jars sitting comfortably in the bottom. I've got about 3 inches of water down around the bottom of the jars. Next goes my little spacer. Actually, you want this little spacer to sit as level as you can because you're going to stack another row of jars on top of this. So, like this. And I've got 4 more jars to go in on the top row. That's it. This pressure canner, it has some alignment marks, but they were really hard to see. So when I got it, I made a little black marker, but it basically only fits one way on here. So basically you drop it down, you turn it just to get these little hooks to hook here. And this is critical. This is what makes the seal. But you start tightening these little knobs very gently, which tightens the lid down. And you want to tighten them down evenly is the key. So you want to look and make sure you have the same space in here. So I have less space on this side. So I'm going to loosen these a little bit and tighten these a little bit. Just to make that seal happen in there, that metal to metal seal. And then once you got the lid on even, just give everything a gentle snug. Doesn't have to be super tight. And then you put the weight on, in our case at the 10-pound position, and turn on the stove. Now it's going to take quite a while. It'll probably take 30 minutes or an hour before it actually starts to boil to the point where it's making pressure. You'll see the pressure come up. I think we want to see that. The pressure should start at about 240, 245 degrees. It's the pressure, but it's reading it's kind of interpreted that over into degrees of Fahrenheit. So in other words, when you hit the pressure in the can, it should be about 245 degrees inside the pot. And you want to just maintain the burner so that it's chirping like this about once per minute, a couple times a minute. You don't want it constantly blowing off steam. And then once it starts to chirp, once we've reached our 245 degrees, in accordance with my recipe book from the manufacturer, it's 110 minutes. So you want it to chirp for 110 minutes and then you just turn it all off and let it cool. Oh, one more step. You gotta stay hydrated. You have to stay hydrated through this process. It's very important. This is about day number 3 of messing with this salmon, so. Okay, so we've done our 110 minutes and we're going to open it up. It's cooled off. I've removed the weight so there's no more pressure inside. And we're going to loosen the lid. Now, these are still very hot. Some of them they're still boiling actually, if you look. There's one. This one's still, look at that. So that'll boil probably for a couple of hours or a few hours. And we're just going to put them out and let them cool on the counter. So far we have, okay, you have to know if they've sealed that one didn't seal. That one sealed. That's sealed. Questionable. But if you just leave them sit, a lot of times as they cool, a lot of them will seal. So don't give up yet. That one's still boiling, see that? Boiling. And we will leave those there for a few hours until they cool. Okay, so we're all finished. Got this canner cleaned up, ready to put away in storage. You should, once the jar lid's dry, you should at least put the date on it. So I put the month and the year on these in the middle of doing that. But like I said before, it is kind of normal for once in a while a jar not to seal. And in this batch, I have 2 jars that did not seal. So once the cans cool off completely, you check it. I do it by sound. The ones that seal have a higher pitch. The ones that don't seal, these 2 did not seal. So sealed, not sealed. Sealed, not sealed. Also, there's a little pop top didn't. One quick tip though, if you get one out of the canner after they cool to room temperature and it doesn't seal, go ahead, snug the lid down a little bit, the ring, and put it in the refrigerator, and a lot of times that'll cause it to go ahead and finish sealing, so you can kind of save it that way. But these 2, there's nothing you can do except eat them right now. You could run them through the whole process again of canning, but I wouldn't do that. We'll just eat those in the next week. If you got anything out of this, please hit the like button and subscribe. If you've got any comments or suggestions or questions, go down to the comments section and post them down there. And thanks for hanging out with us at Far Out Alaska.